According to General Hospital spoilers for Thursday, August 7th, Drew Kane's threat will enrage Jen Sidwell, while Emma Scorpio Drake's plot is jeopardized. Sonny Corinthos will also receive excellent news, so viewers should expect some intriguing narrative twists. For openers, Anna Devane will inform Felicia Scorpio that Emma plans to make a move on Professor Henry, Hank, Dalton tonight. Anna appears to be seeking Felicia's assistance in stopping Emma, but she may not be expecting Giovanni Gio Palmieri to take the lead in the lab break-in scheme. Anna may also make use of her other connections in Thursday's GH episode. We'll see if that's to sabotage Emma's plan, or if Anna intends to utilize those contacts to watch the situation in Dalmatia. Over with Trina Robinson, she will advise Emma to reconsider taking the research assistant position. Trina will believe Emma should listen after Jocelyn Jacks accused Dalton of being a sleazy, and advised her to avoid him. Talk will inevitably shift to Gio, so Emma will tell Trina about her emotions for him. The fact that Gio is so committed to this lab break-in operation will pique Emma's interest. Jordan Ashford will meet with Laura Collins and send over some Sidwell information. Laura will be uncomfortable asking Jordan to take a risk, likely connected to Sidwell's takedown or feud with Sonny, but Jordan may insist on doing so regardless. Alexis Davis will then inquire as to whether Christina Corinthos Davis regrets putting Molly Lansing Davis and Cody Bell at odds. Christina may convince herself that it's for the best, but she'll still feel bad about spoiling Molly's new opportunity at romance. Across town, Brooke Lynn Quartermain will have some good news for Sonny, and she may disclose that they've agreed to keep all the money laundering investment drama at Deception. Drew will push Sidwell's buttons. Drew may make certain demands and threaten to turn against him if their relationship is no longer mutually advantageous. You wouldn't threaten me, would you? Sidwell questions Drew in Thursday's JH teaser video. Finally, Ava Jerome will put Rick Lansing's allegiance to the test, but he may fail if he makes Elizabeth Baldwin the focal point of his life. Rick may show Ava that she did the right thing by confronting Alexis and forcing him out of the blackmail scheme. According to General Hospital teasers, Rick and Ava will have more strife in the coming episodes, so stay tuned. General Hospital spoilers are available for Thursday, August 7th, 2025. Fans should expect Anna Devane to pull some strings. Jerome tests Rick Lansing. Emma Scorpio Drake also bonds with Trina Robinson. Continue reading to learn more about what will happen in the next episode of ABC's soap opera. Emma Scorpio Drake bonds. Let's begin with Emma, who recently had an unusual conversation with Jocelyn Jacks. Even though Joss had departed as Professor Henry Hank Dalton's research assistant, she had a warning for Emma. However, due to the competition between the young women, Emma will be unsure whether to believe her or not. The activist could talk to Trina about it. Of course, Trina would inform her that Joss would not issue her a warning unless it was true. Brooke Lynn Quartermain confesses over she delivered a bombshell on Harrison Chase. Before beginning the adoption procedure, BLQ must repair her friendship with Gio Palmieri. The investigator was clearly irritated, but agreed to wait for BLQ to be ready. Next, the brunette will tell Sonny Corinthos about the scenario. While Sonny would want to assist BLQ, he may argue that this must be Joe's decision. The mob boss may also inform the young woman that forgiveness would take time. It cannot be pushed. Rick Lansing will be tested according to General Hospital previews on Thursday, August 7th. Ava will put Rick to the test. Fans are aware that Ava has not been thrilled with Rick's interest in everyone except her. It was Ava's idea to start the blackmail plot in the first place. However, she has now presented to Alexis Davis the notion of cutting Rick out, which might significantly reduce the blackmail amount. So, it'll be interesting to see if Rick has a gut instinct and has taken preparations. Remember, he wasn't really into the blackmail notion, and expressed a desire not to lose his law license or freedom. Read this. General Hospital spoilers. Jocelyn and Britt's wild encounter, a mission gone wrong? On Thursday, August 7th, 2025, fans will see Anna Devane angry after being carried to Jack Brennan's office in a black hood. It is implied that Anna will end up pulling some strings. Of course, this might refer to Britt Westbourne as well. Jordan Ashford will have some updates for Laura Collins on Jen Sidwell. Which narrative are you most looking forward to witnessing on Thursday, August 7th, 2025? Drew was certain he had everything under control, or so he thought, until his most recent meeting with Sidwell revealed considerably more than he expected. The crisis had been escalating for weeks, with each move revealing layers of secrets and agendas that no one wanted revealed. Drew had been playing a hazardous game, weaving threats into his negotiations, believing that his past provided him an advantage. But Sidwell was no longer the cautious man who had previously avoided confrontation. Drew's perceived advantage was rapidly slipping away. Sidwell's posture changed the moment Drew offered his warning. What was supposed to be a deliberate intimidation strategy soon escalated. Sidwell's eyes, which were before hesitant, hardened as if a switch had been flipped. He knew Drew wasn't bluffing, but he wasn't going to be driven into a corner. Drew had said just enough to warn Sidwell that if he didn't comply, everything he'd worked so hard to conceal would be exposed. Drew had gathered just enough information to rattle him, including files, talks, and money transfers. He underestimated Sidwell's desperation. Drew walked out of the meeting believing he had won. His smug confidence was on full show as he satisfied himself that he had neutralized a threat. But Sidwell had already made a call as Drew exited the building. If Drew desired conflict, Sidwell might provide something even more lethal: exposure. And what Sidwell knew affected more than just Drew. It implicated others, including those Emma had relied on to keep under the radar while her plan was built. Emma, who had been meticulously working behind the scenes on her own objective, had no idea that Drew and Sidwell's argument was tearing apart the very foundation she had spent months creating. Her strategy was based on secrecy, timing, and trust, three elements that were suddenly sliding through her fingers. She had trusted Drew to keep his engagement clean, restricted, and strategic. Instead, he drew attention to their network and created a threat she couldn't readily control. Emma suspected something was awry before she received the call. It was a familiar gnawing in her chest, which she had learnt not to ignore. When her contact finally contacted out to tell her about the encounter, the specifics felt worse than she could have imagined. Not only had Drew gone rogue, but Sidwell was dangerous in ways Drew didn't realize. Sidwell had nothing to lose. Worse, he had access to the same channels that Emma used to covertly advance her agenda within Port Charles. Emma had counted on stealth. Her strategy was not violent or manipulative in the usual sense, but it was sophisticated and required uninterrupted execution. It depended on particular people making specific movements at specific times, and suddenly everything was accelerating in ways she couldn't control. She spent the night examining conversations, identifying pathways, and deleting any digital traces that could point back to her. She knew Sidwell have wealth. If he felt like retaliating, he would delve deep and expose everything. Meanwhile, Sonny Corinthos was oblivious to the impending mayhem. For the first time in a long time he felt at ease, and received excellent news. Sonny had discovered that something long overdue had finally been resolved in his favor, something personal that provided a level of relief that money or power could never purchase. It had nothing to do with business, negotiations, or vengeance. It was simply a human moment. A letter from a distant contact verified that a previously thought to be broken familial tie was in fact being mended. It served as a reminder that, even for a man like Sonny, who was surrounded by enemies and power maneuvers, there were moments of clarity and grace. He delivered the news softly with a few trusted friends, not making a big deal about it, but the change in his mood was undeniable. He smiled more freely. He was not monitoring every shadow. He even made time to stop by Kelly's for a coffee, where he swapped cheerful banter with both old acquaintances and strangers. It was a rare look at Sonny the man, not the mob boss. But the calm was more fragile than he anticipated. Drew was already scurrying as Sonny welcomed the wonderful news. Sidwell made his move and it was terrible. A file was released anonymously to the press, not enough to spark a scandal, but enough to raise concerns. Drew saw the headline and immediately recognized it as a warning. Sidwell was not going to wait until he was damaged. He was going to burn everything before Drew could touch him. Emma noticed it too. Her heart fell when she read the headline. She could read between the lines. The leak was not intended for public consumption. It was a signal. She realized this was only the first wave. If she did not act now, everything would collapse. She called Drew, but he didn't answer. She left him a straightforward and chilly message. You jeopardized the entire organization. Drew was rattled now. Either fix this or stand aside. He had always been more of a soldier than a thinker, and Sidwell had flipped the script faster than he could respond. He had no idea what Emma was fully involved in. He hadn't bothered to ask. Now he regretted his hubris. He needed to find a method to stop the leak and convince Sidwell to back off without escalating the situation. But Sidwell was finished negotiating. Emma shifted strategy. She turned on a backup channel. A quiet favor from someone who owed her. It meant bringing in a player she didn't want to involve, but there was no other option. If Sidwell was going nuclear, she needed someone to stop him before the harm was done. She went about her day like a shadow, undetected yet systematic, contacting people via encrypted lines and checking for signs of exposure. Sonny continued to relish his good news, oblivious that forces underneath Port Charles's surface were moving again. But even he began to suspect something was wrong. Britt mentioned an extraordinary increase in digital traffic coming from Sidwell's known contacts. Sonny did not overlook indications like that. He didn't really understand what was going on, but he was aware enough to pay attention. He discreetly started asking inquiries. It was not long before Sonny and Emma's paths crossed. They met by chance, or so it appeared. A peaceful spot at Charlie's, where they came across each other after years of orbiting satellites in the same city. Emma hadn't intended to include Sonny, but after their brief talk, she felt it might be wiser to keep him partially aware. Not all of the information, just enough to save him from being collateral damage. Sonny listened intently, nodding slowly, taking up on what she did not say. He'd seen the expression in people's eyes when things got out of control. Emma had that expression. "I don't need to know the whole picture," Sonny explained after a pause. "But if it's going to spill over into my world, I need to know how close it is." Emma provided him a brief list of names. Nothing damning, just enough to help him navigate the terrain. Sonny recognized everyone. He made a few calls that night and learned within hours that Sidwell had been sighted meeting with a mutual contact who had previously attempted to double-cross Sonny himself. That was enough for him to take the situation seriously. Drew, on the other hand, was losing allies rapidly. The more he attempted to shut down, the more isolated he became. He understood too late that his threat had made Sidwell more dangerous rather than more submissive. People were beginning to distance themselves. Even people who had previously trusted Drew were now questioning his judgment. Emma was not responding his messages. Sonny was now watching him from afar. And Sidwell? Sidwell was only getting started. The tipping point occurred on a peaceful afternoon. A second leak occurred, this time more devastating. Not just about Drew, but also about links between him and others involved in numerous economic ventures that avoided law. Emma spotted the pattern right away. It was a layered takedown, designed to gradually remove influence. She needed to get deeper underground. She sent Drew one final message. "This was never about you. However, you have turned it into a personal matter. And now you've made it dangerous." She wasn't expecting a response. Sonny took his own steps. He met with Britt, and they devised a strategy to intercept Sidwell before things escalated further. It was not about defending Drew. It was about maintaining the balance of power in Port Charles. If Sidwell proceeded on this road, too many innocent individuals could be caught in the crossfire. What began as a simple threat has escalated into a three-way silent conflict. Drew was trying to save everything he could, ignorant that he was already encircled. Emma was managing damage control while protecting her larger goals. Sonny, with his freshly regained concentration and peace of mind, was quietly prepared for the next storm. His wonderful news was true, and for a time it gave him hope, but he knew better than anybody that calm in Port Charles never lasted. Drew stood in the dim corridor outside Sidwell's office, his jaw tense and eyes blazing with rage. Even under his suit, the tightness in his shoulders was palpable, and his voice, low but dangerous, came through gritted teeth. Drew had run out of patience after Sidwell had continually overstepped. It wasn't only about business anymore. It was personal. Drew had crossed the line too many times, and he was now willing to do what he had previously promised not to do. Sidwell attempted to remain calm, dismissing the threat with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. However, Drew's presence had changed. Drew was no longer the courteous businessman with boundaries. He was becoming someone much harder, closer to the man who had faced the worst of Afghanistan and then withstood the turmoil of Port Charles. This version of Drew was dangerous, and Sidwell realized it too late. "I know what you did," Drew snarled. "You believe you can play everyone and walk away unscathed, but I'm not like the others you've duped. If you make one more move, one more whisper behind closed doors, one more attempt to sabotage, I will reveal everything. And I mean everything." Sidwell's eyes flickered with doubt, a fleeting fracture in his confidence. Drew leaned forward, his words like a blade in the darkness. "Do you suppose Anna doesn't already have her suspicions? You believe you are protected because others are distracted? Don't count on that." Sidwell stuttered a vague denial, but Drew was finished listening. He walked away not because he was finished, but because he was giving Sidwell a chance, a single chance, to leave without being destroyed. But Drew knew Sidwell would not accept it. People like him never did. That meant Drew had to be prepared to follow through. Anna was already experiencing a growing sense of dread. Her instincts were screaming that something deeper was going on beneath the surface, something more sinister than what was in front of her. She couldn't shake the suspicion that Drew was not telling her everything. He had changed since returning from his meeting abroad. Harder. More cautious. She wanted to believe he was handling it, but experience had shown her that secrets had a habit of erupting when least expected. Anna had already launched a stealthy investigation, depending on contacts she hadn't contacted in years. She didn't want to bring Jordan or the WSB in just yet. Not until she had a better grasp of what she was dealing with. What she discovered disturbed her. Rumors about Sidwell linked to a far broader network, subtle manipulations in business accounts, silent transfers to shell firms, and names appearing on encrypted conversations that did not belong in Port Charles. Drew was in the thick of it, and Anna began to suspect he wasn't simply trying to stop Sidwell. He might be taking matters into his own hands. She pondered confronting Drew immediately, but something told her he would not speak. Not yet. Instead, she kept watching, gathering, waiting. But she was already tired of waiting. She had seen far too many people burnt by their own quiet, and she didn't want Drew to be the next one. Christina sat in the corner of her apartment, glancing at the messages on her phone that she had yet to respond to. She felt the weight of her decisions growing heavier with each passing day. Her once confident trust in her decisions began to fade as reality set in. She had assured herself that she was ready to bear a child for Molly and TJ, but now she wasn't so sure. Christina attempted to remain strong as the process began, but the emotional toll was greater than she expected. She missed the simplicity of her own existence. Predictability, which she had previously deemed monotonous, now seemed like a blessing. Christina felt guilty every time she looked at Molly and saw hope in her eyes. What if she lets them down? What if she was unable to do this? What if she didn't really want this? Sonny had inquired whether she was certain. More than once. And she dismissed him, maintaining she was. But now, when she considered talking to him, she feared the disappointment in his eyes. Christina valued her father's views, despite their conflicts. He had changed in recent years, becoming more distant and stressed, yet he had always been her defender. What would he say if he saw the doubt in her now? Will he try to pull her out of it? Or would he simply shake his head, telling her she was in over her head? She remembered a recent talk with Ava, which had been unexpectedly candid. Ava had glanced at her and stated, "You don't have to be a hero to prove yourself." Christina had no idea what to reply at the time, but those comments resonated much louder now. Perhaps she wasn't doing it for the correct reasons. Perhaps she needed to have a real conversation with herself, Molly, and Sonny, before it was too late to undo what had already happened. At the Corinthos mansion, Sonny was coping with an unexpected jolt. A phone call had arrived from one of his old associates, and the name they said made him sit down, Sidwell. Sonny is not generally aware of this person. The man worked in corporate circles that Sonny did not typically interact with. But there had been whispers of Drew making waves, treading on the wrong toes, and Sidwell attempting to push back. Sonny disliked not knowing what was going on. He had established his empire by understanding the game better than anybody else, predicting plays before they occurred. But lately things had changed. Everyone around him was harboring secrets. Carly had her own agenda. Nina remained distant. Jason returned but was haunted. And now Drew? Drew was doing something dangerous, and Sonny found out about it from someone else. This did not set well with him. Sunny leaned back in his chair to process. If Drew was hunting Sidwell, and Sidwell was actually dangerous, things could get ugly quickly. Sunny had avoided much of the violence, attempting to isolate himself from the harsher aspects of his existence. But he wasn't naive. Sometimes the only way to keep the peace was to apply pressure. Drew was the shocking part. Sunny did not expect him to go so far. Drew was known for being controlled, measured, and meticulous. So if Drew was now threatening individuals, that indicated a change. Either Sidwell had pushed too far, or Drew had passed an internal limit and was not looking back. Sunny had to know which. He phoned Britt and urged him to quietly investigate Sidwell, and more crucially, keep an eye on Drew. Not to intervene but to understand. If Drew was spiraling, Sunny wanted to be there before things got too bad. And if Drew was doing the right thing in the wrong way, perhaps it was time for someone to intervene and guide him back. The pieces were moving across Port Charles, some in broad daylight and others in shadow. Anna was not sleeping. Christina was contemplating her whole future. Drew walked toward the storm, his fists clenched. And Sunny was beginning to suspect that his time away from the center of the activity had rendered him blind to how quickly the landscape changed. Christina finally took up her phone, typed a message to Molly, and then deleted it. Then start again. She needed to inform her. She needed to explain she was no longer sure. She might not be able to follow through. That it wasn't because she didn't love her. Rather, she was realizing she hadn't been honest with herself. Her hands shook as she sent the message. She watched the typing bubble on the screen, wondering if that was the moment everything unraveled. Anna sat in her office, flipping through the latest intelligence, connecting the dots that led to a larger conspiracy. Her hand hovered above the phone. Should she call Jordan? Or Drew? Or Sunny? Every name carried hazards. She realized she couldn't wait much longer. Something was developing. The pressure was building, and someone was about to break. Drew remained outside Sidwell's building that night, watching from a distance. He had not informed anyone. Not even Sam. Not Jason. He had made a decision. Drew was prepared to abandon the relationship if Sidwell didn't back down, if he made another move against his family or his firm, legal or otherwise. He had always believed in fighting fairly, but perhaps it was time to get dirty. Only once. For the correct reasons. Sunny finally met Drew face to face. The confrontation was modest but fierce. Sunny asked if he needed assistance. Drew said no. Sunny questioned if he was certain. Drew didn't respond, but Sunny could see it in his eyes. Weight, gloom, and determination. Drew had already accepted the cost of the line he was going to cross. That was the most startling aspect of all. Not that Drew was threatening Sidwell, but he meant it.